Hey guys, welcome back to some more AFK Arena. In today's video, we are taking a look at probably the best endgame team building guide I've seen out there. Big shout out to Arty. We've got him on with us. We're going to go through this guide, go through more in depth into a couple of the teams to take a look at it. Keen for you guys to jump over to Reddit. I'll leave it linked in the description and give this thing as many upvotes as possible. It's creating a storm on Reddit at the moment, to be honest. So Arty, welcome. Tell us about the guide. Give your shout outs to your mate who's done the art and all that stuff, and then we'll get into it.
Hey guys, I'm AFK Arty. I produce content on Reddit and Discord. This guide was one of probably my favorite projects to ever do. It took about a month to fully create. It goes through 16 different meta teams, I think 44 total pictured formations. Alpatex, my visual designer, wonderful guy, put it all together for me in like a week.
It's a crazy turnaround. And with this one, like, obviously it took a fair bit of time. Where did you get all of your information to put these together?
So this is a mixture of what I do myself. I push through chapter 35 on my primary account, 34 on a bunch of other alts, as well as looking at info from other players, some people like AimB, Clean My Whip, and a whole bunch of other people. I'm very active on the Discord, so I look at kind of what teams are funneling through everywhere and kind of the information flow.
And now this is a guide to endgame. I know you've put it in your disclaimers at the bottom, but what do you classify as endgame?
So my classification as endgame is anywhere from about chapter 33 onward. Currently 31 and 32, they do start multiple teams, but a lot of the secondary and third teams are quite weak. Whereas in 33 plus, you start entering 5 teams, and then there's a whole lot more to fight.
Now, jumping in to look at some of these teams, there's a few that really excited me when I got in here. I just want to have a quick touch on. Well, actually, what we'll do first is we'll go through all of them, and we'll just do a quick 1-minute summary on the operation of them. Are you happy to do that sort of thing? And just give a basic recap on people who maybe, in that chapter 25 to 30 range, starting to look at building the multiple teams, see if there's some options for them. And the great thing about this guide is you have done the optimal investment. That's where you're going to be like, if it was a one single team thing, like in Tower or something like that, that's what you'd be using. But when we look at the multi-fight or the budget, they're more manageable teams when you're doing some of those multi-fight stages and stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic. But Thorin Cheese, quick summary about what it is.
Thorin Cheese, to put it simply, it's based around using Thorin's ultimate and signature item and grouping all the enemies on top of him. That way he can retaliate all the damage he takes from the enemies, who usually have higher attack, back towards them. Very simple as long as you can figure out sort of enemy movements. For example, if there's a ranger hero who's opposite of Thorin, you're going to have to Lorson link them or move them in some way. Whereas for melee heroes, they can just kind of walk into Thorin and you don't have to do much.
Definitely. And I don't use Thorin Cheese too much. It's just not my cup of tea, but it is funny when you can just group a whole enemy team together and just delete them with an ultimate from Thorin. It's really nice. Moving on from that, we have another form of cheese. It's the Lucretia cheese. Now, I'm pumped for this one because I'm actually building towards this on my free-to-play account. I think I need 4 more copies of Lucretia, and I'm there with her ascended. What are the key points for the Lucretia cheese to make it actually work?
The biggest thing is just having Lucretia at Ascended with about a plus 20 sig. Anything past that always helps her because she's a high damage carry. But as long as she can benefit from her allies dying, that's all she needs to truly do the full team.
And do you think the furniture is necessary or just nice bonus?
I don't think it's necessary most of the time. There are some unique stages where the anti-ult is going to be very impactful, but on average it's not required, although I do suggest building in.
Definitely. And the budget formation there with 2 level 1 hypergenes, that's just there for the hypergene bonus, obviously, to get those extra buffs, the energy regen and that sort of stuff to allow it to work. And that's the thing I love about this one is Brutus is often a character that most people don't use in all formations. So he's really nice that you can actually just throw him in there and make him work. I often ascend my Brutus on my accounts and then just link him to a dimensional. So it's nice that he can have a use in that sense as well. And then obviously the Lawson does fight for some other teams, but making use of that link. And I'm assuming we can always drop out that Lawson if we have to and make something else work against certain comps.
Oh, yes. Yeah, any hero can fit in here. It's more so just manipulating how Lucretia can damage enemies.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the Gwyneth. Now, this is one I love. My girl Gwyneth, she's always been awesome. You normally try and target this sort of comp against enemies that have 3 back row enemies that stay in the back row, and then you basically just shred with the Gwyneth. Is that pretty much the play you go for?
Yep, that's pretty much always the play. Once you start entering 35 and 36 with enemy SIGs, you end up having to pivot more into a CC option, which is why you see an Alma Feral team there to kind of slow down enemies a lot more.
Yep.
But otherwise, going up until that point, just heavy damage is all you really need.
And obviously with Pharrell and Gwyneth both being heavily based on their normal attack speed, does the slowing down of them by Ulna hurt too much or not too much to make a difference?
You don't notice it too much because of Farah and Gwyn's stuns, both on the enemy backlines and front lines with Farah, so they do far less than you'd expect.
Now, the next one, and this is one that I got really excited when I saw, and that is going to be the SKRG Invade with the Kren. Now, I'm pumped to see Kren in the optimal investment, and just really nice to see Maulers actually getting a team after so long with not really any viable teams. And that SKRG furniture was one that was just, as soon as the furniture came into it, it was something that was just always going to get better the more characters that came into the game. Because it is such a buff to allies, do you want to just explain quickly how the SKRG Invade works?
Yeah, so it utilizes SKRG furniture, which is a huge buff based on if you're on the enemy half of the map. I believe it's about 50% damage and about 50% energy gain. So using heroes like Citrana and Titus, you easily invade onto the enemy side along with SKRG. And Kren punishes enemies with his bombs on the backline, as well as he's able to free cast, because one thing a lot of people don't know about Kren is that his signature item is mistranslated, and it applies on his ult as well, which already has very high damage. So you're constantly stunning and locking down the enemy backlines.
Definitely. Now, have you tried Anarchy in this type of formation? Do you see any synergies with Anarchy and Kren, or is it more the SKRG, Citrana, and Titus that are doing the bulk of the work to allow Kren to use his ult, and then that's good enough?
You can definitely toss in Inoki for this team. Inoki is very effective, especially if a hero like Citrana or Titus is taking a lot of early damage. And if an artifact like Shroud doesn't work on Titus, the extra Inoki shield is very effective.
And I think this is a good time because I forgot to mention earlier, he has done in-depth, and we will go into some of these teams, in-depth guides with a bunch of sub options and stuff like that. So every team that he has listed here does have one of these. So we will go through a couple of those at the end. Like I said, a lot of work, not just this main page. We've got one of these for every team that is listed. So it's pretty crazy if you go check out that Reddit post. Moving on from that, the classic Disrupt. Give us a couple words about that. I think it's sort of self-explanatory in the name, but go ahead.
Yep, this is a team. It's mostly falling out of meta currently, but still has a lot of applications. It's just based around using Farah and constantly CCing the enemy teams. Heroes like Orthros, sometimes Mezoth, Nara, just very good single target lockdown heroes are all you truly need to make the team excel. Beautiful.
And then the next team, Energy Cycle or God Comp, whatever you want to call it. I think just about everyone knows about this comp. The basic gist of it is to cycle through ultimates and use it as his passive to actually lock them out. But I wanted to take note about the budget team where you don't actually have Aziz, but the principle still applies of cycling through basically ultimates, but also having a lot of CC with the Tassie in there and the Pharrell, and allowing Soros to be able to stack up and start healing as well. Next up, we have another form of cheese, which is the Izold cheese. Now, I've been loving Izold lately. Silas as well, two of my favorite heroes in the game at the moment. Give us a quick recap on how to make this Izold work.
Yep, so Izzet has two main goals whenever you use him. The first goal is to get him to ult, which is usually accelerated by heroes like Rowan, Leica, any sort of energy gain. And then the second half is to kill one enemy to start stacking his mitigation. Usually this is really effective with Farah or Silas, who stop enemies' healing output while doing out decent damage. But just Izzet himself is enough of a tank to get himself rolling. And then usually the only protection he needs is one barricade. And then he's ready to go.
Nice. And what kind of requirements do you think Izold needs for this in signature item and furniture?
Izzet himself, I think the bare minimum you'd want to start using him at is plus 20, 3 out of 9, but the plus 30 is a very large jump, and I would suggest going for it.
All right, moving on to that, we obviously have Irons. Now, I just wanted you to talk a little bit about this endgame Irons team compared to what a lot of people may be using sort of in the sort of late game, you know, that chapter 20 to 30 stages. The differences using the Zafrael and stuff like that.
So the difference between sort of the optimal versus what most people are using is mainly your repertoire of heroes as well as the furniture investment you can give. With the optimal team, as you see with Zaf and Rowan, the big thing is that Zaf leaps away from Rowan pots, that way Ainz is able to get them easier, as well as the instant stun is enough time for Ainz to trigger his furniture effect, as long as he stalls long enough. Whereas for a lot of budget players, your Ainz isn't going to have that full 9 furniture, so your better game plan is to just cycle ults, stall a lot more effectively with like Brutus, Rowan, Tassi.
It's actually, I still get mesmerized by Irons because it's just so powerful. All you need to do is get him to that ult. And obviously sometimes it doesn't get you the victory necessarily, but a lot of the times it's just good enough. And what sort of investment on Irons would you recommend for Irons comps?
Ainz will take as much investment as you can give him. A plus 30, 9 out of 9, even with gear, cannot go wrong on him whatsoever.
Yeah, Irons for me, if you were lucky enough to be around when he came into the game, it's just one of those no-brainers. You just invest in him till he's done, especially, people that were around that chapter 20 mark are definitely way past that if they got an Irons now, because any investment you put into him is just going to basically skyrocket your progression because he is ridiculous. Moving on from that, we do have the Burst comp. Give us a couple words about this. More strong in PvP. The optimal investment, I have seen that it's sort of getting phased out a little bit in the PvP meta, but good to see that it can still be used in campaign as well.
Yep, I think the version I pictured was more sort of PvP oriented, but at optimal with Zaf, it still is very effective. And the team overall is kind of the upgrade to the sort of standard late game Iron sets, where you take Iron and Leica and you add some more heroes, primarily Zolrath, once you can invest into them.
Yep.
And it's able to whittle away at very weak back lines or front lines who are not very tanky whatsoever.
And for those that don't know the Zolrath position in this team, it's to slow the enemy's entry into the battlefield with his furniture, allowing Iron to sit in that front row and not get interrupted and guaranteed to group up the enemies. And then you've basically got Gwyneth guaranteed to hit 4 enemies. And with that Lawson, you're going to be linking 2 of those enemies getting hit, meaning they're basically going to be taking double damage from Gwyneth because they're both going to be getting hit by the arrows, but they're also going to be getting each other's damage linked to each other, which is just crazy. And like I said, it's a PvP comp, but when you've got two great burst options, plus the CC from Gwyneth if she gets the lightning arrows, it's just incredibly strong. Moving on from that, we have 5-Pool now. Everyone knows one of my favorite comps in the world is Chicken Iron. Every new hero that comes in that has an AoE has potential to go with this comp. The reason I love this comp so much is just that. It's basically... it just feels like no matter what characters come into the game, if they have an AoE of some sort, especially CC, I feel like they're going to have potential with this. How would you rank this team compared to all other teams? Like, it seems fairly budget to build. It can use heroes that aren't necessary in all other formations. So do you think it's a worthwhile one to actually invest in?
I think this is the #1 team for players to start building right now. I think it's very easy to invest into. Chicken only needs a +3 on his furniture. He doesn't need a signature item. He doesn't need gear whatsoever. He's there to help Iron pull. And then, as you said, every hero with AoE is able to slot into the team. It doesn't matter what hero it is, and other carries also flex very well into it. Thorin, Lucretia, they're both very, very impactful with the team. The flexibility that the team offers you and the raw power that it brings is effective enough to where it's being seen in replays at the end of chapter 39 right now.
Yeah, that's real nice. And obviously, Iron's just that real good hero the whole game. So a lot of people have him invested. So like you said, with Maulers being fairly middle of the pack with, their functionality, nice to see they have the Skrig team. But in general, it's quite easy just to throw a Chicken on the wish list, get him to that Ascended, 3 furniture, not too hard to get. And then away you go. You've just got a real solid comp for that Iron that a lot of people have already built that's very budget. Moving on from that, we have Damon comp. Now, Damon, along with Izold and Silas, I'm really enjoying the Graveborns at the moment. Tell us about the Damon comp, how it functions, and how he does his thing.
Usual Damon comp is sort of built around stalling for Damon and just letting him start stacking his shields, which then, based off enemy stats, increases his damage, it increases his health, and as he skyrockets more and more together, he's able to slowly sort of steamroll enemies. The newer version of it with Alna now is able to protect him on the front line and give you more backline flexibility.
Definitely. And that's what I definitely liked about Olna when she came in. One of those other heroes that's just got endless possibilities with 9 furniture. Obviously, that team does require a 9 furniture Olna. But like you said, you can always stall with Damon in the back, let him stack up. Something like Brutus, really nice to be able to mitigate some damage and just hang in there for him and allow him to do his thing. And just that damage off Damon. Do you see him as being probably the best evergreen damage dealer in the game, just due to the way he can scale off enemy HP?
Yes, I think as a raw damage dealer, he is definitely top of the crop. Ainz is very strong, but a lot of his power comes through the furniture, whereas for Damon, it's all just raw damage coming out through.
Yeah, even in the sort of mid game, if you have a low ascension Damon that can hide in the back, he can still do massive damage because it's just all based on the enemy stats, which is super nice to have. Moving on from that, we have Khazard Wilders. Now, Khazard, I feel like he hasn't seen much love lately, so give us some love on Khazard and tell us how the team works.
Okay. So this team is something that has originated from the Chinese scene primarily, where it's based around using Khazard and very high CC enemies to completely lock down enemies from basically using any skills. Heroes like Tassi, Pippa, if you're able to chain the 2 ults together, plus Khazard's Sig duration, just stops enemies from being able to frankly do anything. Comboed with heroes like Gorvo and Saurus, or just any form of CC is usually very effective. Khazard himself is low on gaze priorities, but if you pay attention to sort of the western side of the game versus the eastern, Khazard on the eastern side actually has very high gaze priority. So it's sort of a difference in culture of how people play the game.
That's really interesting. I love that sort of stuff. It's always in every game. It always happens. There's a division in the way players do play the game. But it's nice that Khazard, if you're out there and you're like, I just really like Khazard and I want to gaze for him, but he's low on the priority. At least you can gaze in him and for the fun factor, but still be assured that you can make him work along the way. So it's really nice. And is that the kind of team sometimes that you'd play manually on lower speed, or just keep retrying for the RNG? Just with those overlapping CCs and stuff like that?
Usually you try to manual it, but you're always able to auto it if needed. I just try and separate between Pippa ults and Tassi ult, usually having Tassi ult first because Pippa likes to use Windbinder. So you don't want to ult with Pippa first and then have Windbinder run out of energy.
Yep. Beautiful. It's good. I just love seeing Khazard in there. Next one, we do have the stall comp, the Flora stall. Give us a quick recap on that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but just give us a couple words on it.
Yep, it's a PvP team that ended up moving its way into PvE. It's still kind of on the downfall, but does work at some lower deficits. It's based around Talene and Tassi. Just heal up as many tanks as you can. Have 1 or 2 DPS that puts out anti-heal or just big damage. Stall your enemies to death.
Yeah, and Orthros works really well in that comp. The way he lets the highest attack ally keep moving when he uses his ult. It just allows that synergy to keep flowing. And often I often see also Wukong in this as well. And you just run into just endless cycles of not being able to kill everyone, and then Talene coming back, and then Flora just keep raining damage, and you just can't deal with the damage eventually. Like you said, more so in PvP, but also people creeping it into the PvE scene as well. Now, the next one. This one we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into, because when I was scrolling through this guide and I saw Portal Party, I got so excited because I am a big Odin fan. I just feel like he has to have more synergies out there. The way he portals enemies, stuns them as well. With investment, you can actually get him to stun on his first portal, which is just makes him even better, because in the early game, it's slow to get him stunning with his portals, but when you can actually put like the Windbinder on him or something like that to allow him to stun with his first portal, I just see him as being very viable. And then we throw in the Pippa for extra portals. It's just all fun. Now, one thing I do want to note, we had a chat before this. You did say that you do recommend putting Pippa in the middle of the back so she teleports enemies. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. When I was making the guide, it was just a simple oversight. Pippa usually belongs in 4. It's also her safest position.
Yep. So if you don't know, Pippa, if she's not in that middle position, I think she has a 90% chance to teleport one of her allies instead. So you want to put her there to teleport enemies. However, she does get a strange synergy where that if she does teleport an ally, I think it's with her furniture or signature item, they don't take damage and they get a bit of mitigation. Is that correct? Something like that? I can't remember it off the top of my head.
That's on her +20 signature item.
Yeah, but still we put her in the middle. But just give us a couple words on this team and how it works, because like I said, I was really excited when I saw this one come up.
So this is a team that has kind of originated. It was even before Odin's rework, but after his rework, he spiked very high with it, as well as Windbinder has helped the team greatly. It was first piloted by Aimby, who is another Reddit user, as well as picked up by a few other players who have sort of managed to mix the synergies of both portals. Enemies aren't able to move when they're in the middle of being taken from a portal. So it's sort of a new form of CC that the game hasn't really seen.
Yep.
And mixing them together just immobilizes enemies until Odin can slowly whittle away everyone.
And with that, especially the thing I like about having the Turtle Gorvo in that team as well is if you can stack everyone on top of Gorvo, have them all focusing him when he, puts his reflection shield up and stuff. I feel like I just look at that team and I love the synergies because you've got them both teleporting enemies onto a pile, and then you've also got the Gorvo who's going to shell shock on top of that pile. And was Gorvo like a tech choice that sort of got slotted into it and then became a thing, or was he always like a crucial part of that team? Because Gorvo is another one of those characters that I've always liked and always thought he should have some really good positions in the game. But outside of the 5-pool team, I hadn't really seen him used anywhere. So is it just those portals grouping up that just give him the real viability there?
It's sort of another way to unlock extra synergies because Gorvo is already very strong. He's just sort of hard to fully unlock because he takes a lot of player knowledge to use, a lot of haste manipulation on him. But in this team specifically, it's much easier to group up enemies. So he's able to get a lot more damage through his shell shock, through all of his other abilities. Another fun combo that a lot of people kind of sleep on is Torn with this team, is able to group up all 5 enemies onto his Bone Whip.
Oh, I see. Torn's another one I have not looked into anywhere near enough until we had the Battle of Blood and he started dominating battles. Or was it the War of Wits? I can't remember which one. I think it was the Battle of Blood. Got me interested in him a lot more, but he's definitely one that I think can develop more because that sort of event showed what he could really do because I feel like he was overlooked a lot in that one too. Now, quickly with this Portal Party team, you mentioned Windbinder having big effect on it. Where do you actually put your artifacts in this team?
My usual artifact setup for this team is to give Gorvo, depending on if he needs haste manipulation or not, either Call or you'll give him Waistband, the new Fortitude artifact.
Yep.
Since it applies off all forms of CC. Tassi and Nomura are usually Call, and then both Odin and Pippa are usually Windbinder. They both use that artifact extremely well. All
right, now let's just because we're on that team. That's the last main team. We do have the standard late game Iron and Stitchy teams. Now those are just basically before this when you're doing an optimal setup to push into that end game. That's pretty much what those two teams are listed for. Is that correct?
Yep, they're just the standard Wilder team and the standard Graveborn team, as those are the two usual faction summons that I suggest.
Yep, this one here, you obviously can't see Damon, but he's the one behind my head. Anyway, let's jump into Portal Party and take a deep look, just to give you guys an example of these spreadsheets that he's done as well. Really, really in depth. So the thing I want to note about this is, even though you might not see some heroes on this list, obviously because he was limited, he put 3 teams for each one. I mean, there's a lot that's gone in here. But the cool thing is there is a lot more subs and stuff you can use. So if you're looking at one of these teams, now you do state it in your disclaimers down the bottom that, what if I don't have this character? If it's one of the core members, you've got to build them to make that team function essentially. However, anything else, you can sort of play around with all these subs on the DPS, CC and utility side of things to make it work. And this is what really got me when I looked at it. There is so many options. And like you said, you go through a lot of examples, notes, pros and cons on the left-hand side there, and a lot of the options. Now, obviously, you couldn't explain every single substitute in every situation, but at least it gives people an option of what they can build. I just really like how in-depth these guides are. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about these, more in-depth guides for people to look at if they are, looking at one of these teams, want to build them, and then looking at Reddit, looking at these posts? Anything else they need to know when looking at these parts of the guides?
My biggest suggestion is just kind of take the average investment of a hero as what you would use them as in a team. Because for some heroes, they are not going to perform very low. If you're going to try and use a Saurus and he's like plus 20, he's not going to be very effective in the team compared to his usual plus 30. It'd be the same for a hero like Torn. You can't slot a +0 Torn into a team and expect him to do well.
Yeah.
So try and just kind of pay attention to what the average investment is for a hero of that class. And that's where you'd want to apply them.
Definitely. That could be another guide coming out. Minimum investment for heroes to work in endgame.
You've already revealed it.
Oh, wait. Are you actually
that
doing
is one of my plans. That is one of my plans. Future guides. I've got that and a counter pick guide, both in the works.
Oh, beautiful. I did not even know that. I swear, guys, that is so good. Anyway, guys, once again, definitely jump over to Reddit. Go check out this guide. Coming into endgame, definitely check it out. If there's any of these teams that you guys want me to cover, I can do like a series. We have obviously got Kiasma's account, who we do need to push on. So we can test out any of these teams. Let me know in the comments, upvote the comments if you want, on some of these teams you'd like to see spotlighted and used, and we can go ahead and do that. But once again, big shout out to Arty. Make sure you get over there, get to Reddit, give it the like, get him going, because there is a hell of a lot of effort that goes into this stuff, and it really just needs to be appreciated. Any final words, Arty?
Thank you for having me on. Another big shout out to my designer Alpatex for making all this wonderful stuff get put together in a easy to look at format. Thank you again for having me on, and I hope everyone has a great day.